hand for
Be careful.
He's and Scott Higgins, both of them coked up out of their minds.
Listen to you. He's down in the basement.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
I think we should call this the Acement.
The Acement, yes.
Yeah, what do you think there, huh?
I like that. The Acement Studios.
Excuse me, I'm drinking beer. Hold on a second.
We usually drink bourbon on our end.
Yeah,
when we
right.
do the podcast, so
That's all right.
feel free to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You shoot an 8-ball if you want. We don't care, as long as it's good stories.
And welcome to the Aceman, everybody. It's time to go behind the funny. This is Scott Higgins.
And this is Acecito.
Yeah, it came in right. The Ace didn't count me down. He didn't say we're live.
No, I screwed up last week. I know.
Yeah, definitely. But thank you so much for joining us. If you're joining us live, if you haven't had a chance to join us live Wednesday nights on twitch.tv/drinks, jokes, the letter N, storytelling. That's drinks, jokes, and storytelling. We go live every week. You can check us out here in the Aceman as we record. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, thank you. We appreciate it. Don't forget to tell a friend. Don't forget to give us that 5-star review.
Wow, you do that so good. You know what I do good?
It just flows.
I introduce our bourbon date every week.
You're very good at that.
We're in a rotation. We seem to be stuck in a rotation. Yes. We did Angel's Envy a few weeks ago. We did our Up and Down with Justin Morales last week, and we're back to our girlfriend, our original Jefferson's very small batch.
Yes.
Cheers, Clinkies. There's nothing else we can say about them because they're not sponsoring us yet.
But we do still enjoy them.
We still enjoy them. And that's the whole reason why we drank them. We didn't drink it because of sponsorship. We drank it because we like it.
It's very good. If you haven't tried it, definitely we recommend it. We just like we recommend everyone that we've tried so far.
Yeah.
We might have to try some new ones this year.
Yeah, we should.
It's time to break out some new ones.
All
I
right,
think.
we'll try some
new dates.
So listen, we're really excited about tonight's guest. I'm so glad he has come up on the podcast a bunch of times before.
Absolutely.
By multitude of people. I've had my own stories about him, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that as well. Because
you are known to do that.
I used to open up for him a lot.
Did you really?
When I first started? Yeah,
wow.
late 90s. Mid to late 90s. I used to open up for him pretty much almost every time he came down to East Providence. So I was very excited when he said yes. But this guy goes beyond just being a guy who happened to be in East Providence.
Yeah,
he had a couple of pretty big jobs after that. So we'll let him talk a little bit more about them. But he was the warm-up comic and talent coordinator or comedy coordinator for Late Night with David Letterman for 11 years. He was the guy to get you on Letterman. So we're really excited to have him. But he got his start in Boston. So we're really excited to have Mr. Eddie Brill on the Behind the Funny podcast. Welcome, Eddie.
Nice to see you, both of you. It is true that we work together so much in East Providence and some incredible shows there. There was the night that Cheers was saying its goodbye.
That's right. Oh my God.
That was May 20th, 1993, because it was 5 days after my first daughter was born.
Was it really?
And I still have the flyer that I took off of a telephone pole in Boston, hanging in my garage.
I can't believe you remember we had a show.
They were shooting a Showtime special, and Carol Leifer and myself, and I forgot who else was on it, but the famous Rhode Island boxer was there. What's his name?
Vinny Paz.
Yeah, Vinny Paz was hanging out. It was a fun night, and then we all went over to the bar down the street to watch the Cheers thing. And I went to Emerson, and Cheers was our bar. It was
really?
wild.
That's where you would hang out? That's
awesome. It was right down the street from where we did our comedy, and also where we did a lot of our classes. So that was our venue. So it's interesting because I watched Cheers again recently. Like the first season, it was 23 episodes or whatever. It still stands up as a brilliantly funny show.
Absolutely.
It's so funny you say that, Eddie. I just had that discussion yesterday with someone because I've been watching it on Hulu, and it's just as funny now as it was then. You're absolutely right. The jokes hold up, the characters hold up. It was really
well.
I appreciate it more now, I think, than I did at the time when I was watching
right.
it.
And there's a lot of superstar guests who weren't superstars at the time, and they ended up having a career after that. Because, like you said, it was '93, and then before then, and it was pretty great. There's a few shows that are comedies that, like Mr. Ed, for instance, is as a little boy, I'd watch Mr. Ed and laugh, but it really was brilliant comedy writing, and there was a great writing team back then. And also, My Favorite Martian. Sometimes get a lot of DVD presents or digital presents for Christmas, and it's always comedies. People know I love comedy, of course. And those two shows, and the reason why My Favorite Martian, it was an interesting bring up. Today, 58 years ago today, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
Yes.
I
saw that posted. Yep.
And someone had a TV guide. Remember those?
Yeah.
Had a TV guide of all the listings of the shows. And My Favorite Martian was on right before the Beatles.
Oh, that was the lead-in?
The lead-in. So I guess it was a powerful lead-in because the Beatles did okay.
You know what I'm waiting to come out on DVD, Eddie, is the Patty Duke show.
Oh, yeah.
The identical cousins.
Yeah, I know. That was my first closing bit.
I remember that.
It was my second closing bit. I had a bit about using the bathroom before and went in just to wash my hands. And I came out and some lovely woman went in after me and it stunk from the guy before me. And, that was my original closer. But, that didn't last very long. But then the Patty Duke bit became a bit. It was musical and people always laughed.
It.
And years later, I was in San Francisco and someone said, "Hey, do the Patty Duke bit." And I go, "You do it. I don't remember." Then,
I know. I was at a show a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and some lady who hadn't seen me since like Periwinkles. I don't know if you remember Periwinkles.
I was there when the Giants were in that. Remember the earthquake? The Giants and the A's.
Yeah,
I was at Periwinkles watching the World Series
watching it.
Yeah, that happened. It's funny what you remember,
It's crazy. I know. Well, this lady was like, "Hey, do you still do that Roger Rabbit bit?" I'm like, "No, can you remind me? Because I don't remember it. I remember the impression, but I don't remember how to do it, And
that's funny. I'm lucky. My cousin Evan, who is a great guy, of course, we've known each other since we were little babies. And he has a great memory and loves comedy. And he tells me, he'll remind me of some of my old jokes, and it's like, thanks, he's really good at that.
And you're like, I didn't even get rid of it because it wasn't working. I just got rid of it because I wrote new jokes. And we were just talking before we went live about that, how I was out this past weekend talking to someone, and I was thinking about jokes that I just haven't done in maybe about 5 or 6 years, not because they weren't working. It was just I wrote some new stuff, and for time, you just rotate stuff out. And I'm like, oh shit, I should bring some of that stuff back because,
Yeah. And comedians have come up, like Bill Burr came and he said, "Hey, remember that bit you did about this?" And I went, "Oh my God, I forgot about that."
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good bit,
Right.
There, and I talk about that all the time. There are certain comedians that you work with that they have certain jokes that just go into your brain.
You'll never forget
that you
them.
Never forget.
That's just, forget them.
You identify that joke with that person because it just struck a chord with you. It was so funny the way that they did it. And that, I'll do that all the time. I'll work with someone I haven't seen in a long time. I go, "Oh, do you still do that?" And they go, "Man, I haven't done that in forever." But I just found that joke hilarious.
Right.
But yeah, Ace is right. You just rotating stuff out and you forget to do it. So Eddie, how many years total have you been doing comedy?
I started when I was at Emerson in improv and sketch. And I started doing stand-up at the end of the 70s in Boston. I graduated Emerson in 1980. I did comedy often. I didn't do it that often. I got to do the Ding Ho. I got to do Play It Again Sam's. I got to do, a bunch of places, in that era. But I wasn't really that great at it. I was more, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I was kind of new at it. And, the scene was peppered with, geniuses, Don Gavin and the like. So I just quit after it. I moved to New York, I kind of quit. And then an opportunity came for me to start a comedy club in the city, in the village.
Mhm.
And it was called the Paper Moon, and they weren't doing anything in this room, and we turned it into this amazing club that eventually became the Boston Comedy Club. I came Mary Katz, but this was the original room, and it was spectacular. And I had, Adam Sandler was at NYU down the street, so he'd come in, and Colin Quinn and Susie Essman, and the list of names on and on and on. And it was run by comedians. We made sure that it was great. So I started again in '84. So in reality, I've been doing it in a row since '84.
Okay.
But I started in the Boston scene very early in the '70s, and Fran Salamita, who did that film, and I said, Fran, what happened here? What is this? Why am I like a footnote in the story? And then he ended up apologizing to me and go, I didn't know. I said, well, you're doing research.
Right.
Yeah. Because there was such a group of, myself and Dennis Leary, Mario Cantone, and Lauren Dombrowski, and on and on. We were in this wildly successful comedy group. We were at school with Stephen Wright and, all these people. And Fran left all of that out. Like, Eddie Brill, here's one shot of him coming in from New York. And it's like, well, you missed a lot of stuff that happened comedy-wise in the '70s.
Right. Because that focused more on the Ding Ho in the '80s, right? Or for a few years that it was open in the '80s. But
but I was at the Ding Ho, I think, in 1980, 81, I think it was. I don't remember that date. But '84 is kind of when I started running that club, and Colin Quinn and I became best friends, and he helped me run it. Like 1 week he'd run the door and I'd MC the shows, and then we'd switch off, and we'd brought in all these, friends of ours who were like, that we knew from Boston. That's why there was a big Boston contingency, Tony B all the time, who's, of all the great comics in Boston is, Kenny Rogerson, who's one of the greatest comics in the history of comedy. And, and you go on and on. To me, the most consistent, funniest guy that's ever come out of Boston, Tony V.
It's Tony. Yeah.
Tony V.
It's funny you say that, because I produced a show back in October that I had Tony on, because he's one of my all-time favorites too. And we were talking to him, me and another comic, Carolyn Plummer. And Tony said, I've just never lost my love for doing stand-up.
He just loves
He goes,
doing
that's
it,
why
right.
I'll still show up at, a mic and do a set. I'll still, hang around with newer comics and stuff like that, because I still love getting on stage. I still love doing this. It's not just about working on the weekends. I want to go out and tell jokes. I still love every part of it.
And a lot of the older guys, not all of them, a handful of them, never wrote a new joke. And they just went out on their personalities, which was fine. They were big stars, and the people loved them and still love them. And I loved them, and they were mentors for us when we were young kids. But, Tony's one of the ones who just kept evolving and evolving and evolving.
Yeah.
And eventually, is, oddly enough, not that I never thought he was funny. He was always funny, but, such a rich scene. Of all the guys, to me, Tony's the guy who consistently hits a grand slam every time.
Yeah. And when he did his podcast a couple years ago called Dueling Comedians.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he would just kind of wing it, because I went in and did it one time, and he just talked about a few things that happened in the news or something like that. And he's just funny when he talks. He can just pick a subject and just be funny with it.
Some people are just naturally fun. It's funny. We've talked about it, but one of my pet peeves is when someone's in the green room and they're trying material out on you, but they're not asking you, hey, what do you think of this joke or whatever? They're on. Yeah. But there are some people
it's sad. It's really it's an insecurity thing, And I understand it, because as comedians, the power of laughter is so intoxicating that you want that all the time. We get off stage, we're missing it. Yeah. And a lot of people take it to a level that's uncomfortable,
right?
For themselves or whatever. And I understand that. I don't like it. I don't want it.
Yeah.
But I understand the mentality of what it's like, because in those days in Boston, the young days, after the shows, we would, do drugs into the middle of the night because we were so high from performing, and of course that also affected our performances and other
Right.
things later on. But
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I never went on stage blown away or anything like that.
Yeah.
I would do it afterwards, but still,
Okay.
it gets to your brain. It gets it's the even Carlin said everyone thinks I'm stoned. I don't write stoned. I only edit. I have this one joint in my little thing, and I take a hit when I want to edit my material I've written. But
Really?
I never write stoned like everyone thinks I did.
Wow. Yeah, well, and I can see what you were to the point that you were bringing up before, why people do that, because you just made the audience laugh. Now you want to keep making people laugh, but it's going to be even more of a rush if you make other comics laugh, because we're tougher to make laugh. But there are just some people who they're not trying to be funny. They're just naturally funny. And Tony is one of those. Frank Santarelli's another guy.
Oh, God.
Not trying to be. That guy can tell the same story 15 times.
I'm going to laugh every
15
time.
different ways.
Every
and I'm going to laugh every single time.
I know what's coming, and I'm gonna
exactly
really, really hard. He's fantastic. And like not all, most of his jokes are amazing on paper, but there are jokes on paper that if you read them, only Frank could deliver.
Only he could do it right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like the birds and more birds on one line. Kevin Meaney was very similar to Frank in the way that they're both comedy geniuses who you look at it on paper and you go, some funny things, but no, when they went on stage, it was just superpowers.
The delivery and the way that they say it is what makes it just as much. I mean, who else would turn around? At the Queen Mary. What's wrong with you people? It sounded just like her. But
there was no more prolific. There was no more prolific comic in the world other than Kenny Rogerson. He would have notebooks. I think this is true, but when John Panette was first coming up, Nix was repping him because they were smart enough to know that this guy was going to be a star, and they were right. I heard that they said, Kenny, can you help John come up with some material to start out with? And he just handed him a notebook and said, here's a notebook. It might be totally wives' tale or whatever, but Kenny was, so he still makes me laugh.
Another naturally funny guy. We had him on the show a couple of years ago, and we had such a blast with him that night.
He's a guy we just turn the mics on, let him go, and just laugh the whole time because story after story after story.
But the one funny thing to bring up what you were bringing up before about what would have to happen after the shows.
Oh God!
Could not ask him a date. Kenny, how long have you been doing comedy? I don't.
He goes, I can't remember numbers.
Dates are fuzzy.
He goes, the 80s were rough. He goes, I'm not good with numbers anymore. He goes, I tried to calculate once how much I snorted, and I when I got on my second house, I gave up counting.
So good.
So when did you move to New York? Because when you were working the Connection in East Providence back in the 90s, were you already in New York? Because I always thought
I was in New York by then.
Boston. Oh, all right.
What happened was I graduated in June, I guess, of 1980.
Okay.
And I stayed. I was teaching at Emerson. Dennis and we helped form this comedy writing thing at Emerson with Norman Lear.
Okay.
And so Dennis was teaching the adults and I was teaching the kid program, and I did improv mostly with the kids. So I stayed through the summer. So in August of 1980, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go. I was seeing all these people from Emerson who were kind of stars, quote unquote. So not really, but at and your college people that I looked up to, and they were stuck at Emerson and had at Emerson. It was kind of like, I want to move on. I want to take it to the next level. So I decided to move back to New York. My father lived in New York. My sister, who was living in Florida, moved up to New York. My two best friends from college moved to New York. And I figured, you know what, let me just take the plunge. And I got an advertising gig, writing commercials and things. And I went to New York in August of 1980. And it, and I didn't do stand up a lot. I did it a couple of times, but I missed it so much. And I watched all my friends do really, really well.
And that's the thing. You literally were in New York, not doing stand up as the comedy boom was exploding, right?
Right. And
So
then
must have
so
been
it was
tough,
about
like,
2.5.
watching
There was
that.
about 2.5 years of not doing stand up, I would say, at all. And but I really consider the real start of stand up in '84. It's just easier to say,
Yeah.
on that thing. And it's amazing. I still love it I miss it when I'm not doing it. It's still pretty great, and I worked for, I guess it'd be like, almost 37 and a half years at it
Wow.
in a row. And it's just, of all the great jobs I've had, you mentioned Letterman. I was actually there for 17 years.
Oh, all right.
I booked the comics for 11. I warmed up the audience all that time. And I was at the Late Show, not at Late Night. Late Night was NBC.
Okay.
So I only did the CBS years.
At CBS, okay.
And, it was really fun. And it was an incredible job to have. It was a hard job to have.
Yeah.
You 4,000 people and you can only put 12 to 15 people on, where there's already 8 people who are going to be regulars doing it all the time. You had to say 99.9% of the time. And especially when you're a kind of person like wants to, be liked. That doesn't happen.
Yeah. And and you want to help people, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And people don't have no idea what I did behind the scenes. The Letterman people were like, who are you working for, us or the comedians? Because I really fought for us behind the scene. But again, no one's going to,
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate when you look at things now, but there really isn't a lot of stand-up, if any at all, on the late night shows anymore.
Colbert didn't have a stand-up for ages.
Yeah.
He started, and stand-up gets the best ratings.
Yeah.
Really?
More than music. In fact, on the Letterman show, we used to have a stand-up at the end of the show. They put the stand-up in the middle because that was good ratings time for stand-ups, and then the band would go on after. But we, Kimmel probably has like 3 stand-ups.
Yeah.
Conan was the
Conan was
Yes.
doing a lot.
He
right.
was the last one that really started to, because a couple of guys from Boston that we're friends with, like Ray Harrington, Orlando Baxter, they got their first big chance on Conan's show the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And you see, Fallon, obviously he's doing a great job on the Tonight Show, but he kind of turned that into a viral video marketing machine there, and it's working for them, and that's great.
Right.
But there's no room for stand-up on that show anymore.
They have a few stand-ups. Michael Cox, who I know very well, who books the stand-ups out of LA, and he has a
not
few,
that often,
but not like it. Not like it should be. I mean, stand-ups.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of all grew up, and I've talked about it all the time. I would sneak up after my parents went to bed to watch Carson to see who the stand-up was going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how I discovered like Jonathan Winters and people like that, was watching the old Carson shows.
And it's not just late night. It's just it just seems like there's not a lot of opportunity for stand-ups, period, anymore. I mean, every once in a while, Netflix will have like the new faces, and they'll have like half hour of different people, but it's not like it was even, when I started in '89. We had Art Bell on a couple of weeks ago, who started Comedy Central, the Comedy Channel. They were starved for content, so it was great because they'd go around the country, they'd run a contest. Top 9 winners would get to be on, short attention span theater or stand-up. Right. Those opportunities don't happen. You have to make your own now. You have to literally be a marketing machine for your own stuff and get it on YouTube and all kinds of social media and hope that some of your stuff goes viral. And,
right.
I mean, we got a friend, Rodney Norman. He's got this character, and the character does well. He's doing great on Instagram and Reels and TikTok.
And it got him a dry bar.
Yeah, and it got him a dry bar special. So, but it's because he's got this character. But there's so many talented people out there that people don't know about.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned dry bar. Good for dry bar, and they're doing a lot of wonderful things for comedians. But they really do, edit and they make comedians. They don't let comedians be comedians on their thing.
Yeah.
They only want a certain. They really do what the worst thing you can do for comedy. The best, that they're great, and they give a lot of exposure to a lot of really great people. But they really, what's the word? They
restrict what you can do, right?
They restrict the kind of stuff because they think that comedy is supposed to be safe, and it's the opposite. The whole
exactly.
idea,
you have to take chances.
Yeah. and they won't allow that on Dry Bar. So it's good to have Dry Bar, and again, bless them for all the hard work they do. But we need 2 other shows like that, where comedians can really be comedians.
Exactly. I agree.
And they're not there's no censorship on the kind of material. You can't. You talk about Jonathan Winters, or you talk about Lily Tomlin, or you talk about Pryor or Carlin,
right.
Any of the heroes. Those people would go on Ed Sullivan or go on Tom Jones' show. They do network television, and they were clean enough to pass the muster, but they would do edgy, smart material.
They would push the envelope a little bit. I recently heard an interview with the Smothers Brothers. They were the same way too. You know, they would push the envelope a little bit and then start talking politics when no one else was really talking politics.
Right.
You know,
well, it's very hard to talk about politics. There's very few people who are great at it.
Yes.
And of course, we know Barry Crimmins, was one of the best ever in the history of that. And there's, Will Durst in San Francisco,
Jimmy
Tingle. Yeah, and also Mort Saul, but there's a lot of people talking about politics who don't know what they're talking about.
Well, and especially because if you pick one side, you automatically alienate 50% of your audience. And if you're down south, you could alienate 80% of your audience, depending on which side you're talking.
I think we just lost about 15,000 people on that. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just
but you're right. That's the issue is if you're not really good at it, at making people laugh at the ridiculousness of both
at the
sides,
irony.
The irony, exactly,
well
or
said.
at both sides, then you're going to alienate part of the audience, and then it just isn't worth doing.
Then you watch Barry Crimmins and you just go, man, there's very few people like that.
Yeah.
Well, and when we had Bob Marley on, he made a good point, and I think Barry's another guy that did it. They would say something, edgy or something that really pushed everyone's buttons, and then they would litigate their point. They would literally prove to you why their point was valid and kind of bring people back around where at the end, maybe you didn't agree with them, but you were laughing by the end of it.
Because
they would shock you and then litigate their point to make it funny.
And certain people are like that. Bill Burr is like that.
Yes.
He'll say something.
Yeah.
And by the end, honestly, I don't watch a lot of comedy because I don't want to, the mistake of you see some great joke and then 6 months later you wake up and you're like, I got this great idea. Yeah. So, but I did watch Paper Tiger, and that callback that he brings back at the end of the very show to close it out is genius. But it's a perfect litigation point.
Yeah.
Talking about how, why are you so angry? His wife saying, why are you so angry? And then he comes and he brings it all the way around. And then,
him and I had a chat early on because I said, look, you're one of the funniest guys I know.
Yeah.
But every joke of yours, everyone's sucks but you. And I go, it's not compelling. It's not compelling at all. It's, it's arrogant and it's not compelling. And Louis C.K., of all people, taught me this. He said, it's got to come back and bite you in the ass. If you're going to be, you have your point, you make your point. It is your perspective. No one can argue with your perspective. That's a big lesson I learned. They might not agree with you, but every once in a while it's got to bite you in the ass. And I told Bill, if you learn how to do that, I'll put you on Letterman yesterday. And about a week and a half later, because I told him Louis had said it, and he says, I get it. And then, and not that I changed Bill's career. He did Conan before he did Letterman.
Right.
He's a genius, and I wasn't the guy, but I passed on information about the vulnerability. It's got to come back. And, Robert Schimmel, who I traveled with for years, was considered X-rated, but he was just silly and brilliant. And anything he came off as tough or rough, it would come back to bite him in the ass.
Exactly.
And that's what made it human and the word again, compelling.
Right. Well, it's a form of self-deprecation, which we know is funny in comedy. Self-deprecating humor is always funny, but this is in a different way. Because like you said, you're pointing out all the foibles of everyone else. Every once in a while, you got to bring it back on you.
It's got to be like, look, I'm the asshole here. I had a joke a million years ago, 30 years ago, about being in Florida and I'm not going to do the joke, but it ended up where I was, talking about these men and how did they get these women, because these women were so beautiful and they were fat and short and whatever, and Canadians in Hollywood, Florida, where I was living. And I got laughs, but it wasn't really a great laugh. And then I used my theory about this, or not my theory, the theory I learned from other people about having it come back to bite me. Yes, I said, why are these women dating these men? And I added the line, I said, or maybe I'm just an asshole and those are nice guys. I mean, this is just the
outline of it.
And I'm the idiot and I'm jealous. And that's really what changed the joke. And at that time, when I did that joke, it got a big laugh that I never got before, because it was about my jealousy and not about these men. You know?
Yeah, you weren't picking on them.
Huge lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't picking on them. You were picking on yourself. You brought it.
But originally, I was
you.
picking on them. Originally, I was jealous and picking on them, and it was there the whole time that self-deprecation too much is ridiculous.
Right.
Because we're not pieces of shit as human beings, but we make mistakes. And we're allowed to make mistakes.
It's funny because I've tried to. I've talked about, I have 3 daughters, I've been married for 31 years. And obviously that's something I talk about when I'm on stage, but I never want to embarrass them. In the end, I've always tried to make me, like you said, the asshole at the end. But after a while, I don't want to just be the asshole. So some of the things I try to make it like I'm saying something that like I can't, he shouldn't think that way. But then at the end, I come around and I just totally misunderstood what they were saying or doing or something like that.
You make yourself the
that's not self-deprecating. That's human.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's something that somebody had told me at one point too, is to come at it from that angle. And it totally changes the way you think about when you're coming up with an idea or something like that.
I know it's funny you're wearing a Pip shirt, because I was just talking about this the other day. I had only worked Pips once, and it was a horrible experience. I'm from Brooklyn originally. I was born and raised. My aunt grew up down the street from Pips, my aunt and my cousins. And we would go eat there, the best food in the world in that neighborhood. Joe's Clam Bar, it was made Lundy's. It was a great neighborhood. So I was asked when Desert Storm happened, I guess it was 91. Desert Storm happened. They said, we're going to do something in Brooklyn and we'd like you to come be one of the comics. We're going to send a videotape to the soldiers and wish them well and do a little comedy. And I said, I'll do it, in a second. I always want to do, I've always been part of charities, the Clementi Foundation, the Big Poppy Foundation, all this stuff. And so I wanted to do this for the soldiers, especially this war that we shouldn't have been in. And we shouldn't be in any. But that's a different show.
There goes half the audience.
Oh, no. So
no, that's all right.
We lost the
joking.
We have 7 people left. Hi, guys. So what happens is I get the MTV half-hour comedy show, and I'm going to be recording it the night of the Pips gig. But I'm able to do it. I'm able to do the taping. I'm done. I have enough time to rent a car because I'm a New Yorker. I don't have a car. Right. Rent a car, drive to Brooklyn, do the Pips gig, and do what I have to do. So now I tape the MTV half-hour comedy show. I have a friend of mine that I grew up with since childhood in Florida with me, and she and I are having the greatest time. We rent the car, we drive down there. I'm still from like pumped for the show. I was a little bit bummed out that I was so high from that. And I was a little bit bummed out because it was the final night of the MTV half-hour tapings. So it was a big party afterwards. And I was going to miss the party because, I wouldn't be able to get back in Brooklyn in time. So anyway, so the place is jammed. There's cameras all over and they're taping. And I go on stage and I go, hey, everybody, it's so good to be here. And all of a sudden I hear, faggot. And I'm like,
oh, yeah.
And I go, faggot. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And the guy goes, you're wearing makeup, you faggot. And I forgot to take the makeup off from the taping of the MTV half-hour comedy. So I laughed, and I laughed, and I said, oh my God, I just taped the MTV half-hour comedy hour. I wanted to be here so badly that I didn't even take the makeup off. Anyway, I'm sorry that you think that makes me a faggot, but whatever. So now I think I have them back. So I go, so anyway, and the guy goes, a dick smoker. And
You're
I'm
in
thinking,
Brooklyn.
so I missed the party. I'm in Brooklyn. I never was able to do a joke. And
Really?
these army men and women are probably watching this videotape going, "Cricket." And it was the only time I ever worked at Pips. The audience were just
Thanks for bringing
ignorant.
that shitty gig back to him.
No, it's great. It's a great story.
From Max.
I don't
right?
know if you know Max Docelli.
Yeah, very well. Good man.
Max is a very good friend, and he had these and Catch a Rising Star from New York t-shirts made up. And he sells them after shows. He talks about his time there in the late 70s and early 80s when he started and everything, and he sells them after shows. And he gave me this one and a Catch a Rising Star.
That's
and
fantastic.
I unthinkingly wore this shirt tonight.
No, but that's perfect because first of all,
it opened up that story, which was a great story.
And the next night I was doing Showtime at the Apollo. I was getting ready for my MTV half-hour comedy spot. So there's 18 clubs in New York, and I'm running from club to club to club, working on my set, running the set, timing it out. And I was at Stand Up New York, and I was going on, and they said they're auditioning for Showtime at the Apollo tonight. Do you mind going on to an all-black crowd? I go, I don't care what color people are or whatever. I said, I've done a lot of all-black crowds in Atlanta. Damon Wayans used to take me with him, and I'd do these incredible shows in Atlanta. And so I said, I don't care. And I went on stage. I had a great set. It was a TV set, so it was pretty polished. And I left, and the next day I get a phone call. They said, look, I know this is weird, but we'd like you to be on the show. So I said, oh, okay, that's fantastic. They go, nobody else made it. Oh, you're the only person who made it from that.
Wow.
So now I'm on the next night it's En Vogue, Take Six, and me. It wasn't an amateur show. It was big money, and it was and En Vogue where they were Take Six and En Vogue. I mean, it was just luscious. It was one of the coolest shows.
En Vogue
and
is
Sinbad,
amazing.
who I knew was there, and he was the host.
Yep.
And I came out with and Sinbad said, look, he's a friend of mine, even though he's a white guy, treat him well.
Don't kill him.
Don't hurt him. And so I went out there, and the mic didn't work, and the crowd went crazy. So then they had to start all over again. And now when I came out, they wouldn't let me talk. And I was trying to talk, trying to do my things. I said, look, I'm not on the amateur thing here. I've done lots of television. This is incredible. They're paying me real money for this, and I've always dreamt of coming here. And they're going, no, hey, right? So that's after following Pips the night before. So I stayed
in comedy after this weekend,
and I stayed on stage, and I said, ladies and gentlemen, I came here because it was one of my dream come trues to work the Apollo. And I have so much respect for this theater. And unfortunately, you have no respect for me. So you're just going to have to see me on another television show. And I walked off. And Bill Bellamy was like, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was a young comic. Yeah. And the woman came up to me who had booked me, Smith, I remember was her last name, Susan Smith or something like that. She said, I am so sorry. It's my fault. I should have put you on earlier in the night. They thought it was an amateur thing. They were, they didn't know better. The audience wasn't full, so we pulled people off the street and stuck them in the camera. And if you let us air that, we'll give you an extra $500. I said, keep the $500. And
no, I don't want that being on a TV show.
Yeah,
exactly.
I know. So that was that weekend. You're not wearing an Apollo. Ace, you're not wearing an Apollo.
My hoodie is an Apollo Theater hoodie.
Right. But the good news is I went back to the Apollo and had a good set.
That's good. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So obviously, like we've talked about some of the, some pretty wow moments to us in your career, but what are some of the wow moments for you? Like things that you did or people that you got to work with that you were like, wow, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm working with this person. Or
Well, the Charlie Horse with Chance Langton, you know.
oh, that's right.
You know, there's a long line of people.
Shut up.
No, you know, yeah. The Charlie Horse was the worst gig in America.
Everyone says that.
I talked to Bill Downs, who booked it, and he said, yeah, it was a Wednesday night, and when you first worked for us, you had to do the Charlie Horse. That was the sort of punishment.
Rite of passage.
And it was the worst. It was the worst gig I think I ever had.
Yeah.
And I had a date with me, and we had a 35, the longest ride home in silence you ever did, because you go to the Charlie Horse and it's a biker bar, and there are people fighting with pool sticks and beating each other up. And I'm going, where's the stage? And the guy goes, it's in the other room. And you go in the other room, and it was all these women who were the dates or wives or girlfriends. It's a very sad story.
Of the bikers.
And they were all beaten up with slings, arm and slings. There were women with black eyes.
Oh my
There was a
God.
lady with a beer and a stroller. And no one was paying attention. They just wanted to keep going so they didn't have to get home. You know what I mean? It was that sad. And
Wow.
so the only person who was paying attention was the girl I was with, who was scared shitless, and this woman with the baby carriage. And I go, well, at least you're paying attention. And she goes, fuck you. And she throws the bottle at me. And it breaks into a million shattered glass, all in my hair and my jacket. You know.
And then the baby picked up a bottle and threw it at him.
She couldn't say that to her old man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
she was
Gonna
able
take
to.
it out on you.
She was taking it
I
out
know.
on you.
So that's the worst gig. But
Yeah.
but the coolest kind of, I've had a lot of great moments. I've had moments that are very little that are huge. Like I remember working in Western Mass, and there was 2 gigs in the same night, 2 different venues.
Yep.
And I did one gig, and it was outstanding. It was just like, this is why I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
And I was driving the car to the next gig, the music on loud. It was a beautiful day, sun coming through the windows. It was just gorgeous. And I just said to myself, I'm doing the right thing. And that's a very little moment, but
Yeah.
I was never more happier in my life than I was in that moment, knowing that I was doing the right thing for a living. And I went to the other gig, and that gig was great too. So
yeah. Was it a
But the
Norm
great-
LaFoe gig?
oh my God, Norm LaFoe! I actually like
Peking
that guy
Garden.
very much.
He booked me
I
for
got
Peak-
very close to Norm LaFoe, and I only
Did
talked to
you?
him on the phone, but we ended up meeting, and we became really good friends.
Yeah.
I thought he was this, Booker crazy guy, or whatever,
Yep.
but he turned out to be a really wonderful human being.
I did the Peking Garden for him up in Amherst, right near University of UMass Amherst. And it was with Brian Deary. I don't know if you remember Brian Deary.
I do remember.
used
I
to
remember
have-
the name. I don't.
He used to have a booking place called the Funny Farm. So when you talked about the shit gig like the Charlie Horse in Rhode Island, it was Windsor's down at the beach. It was a college bar. And on
Sounds
Sunday,
so good though.
oh yeah, on Sunday
Windsor's.
nights, they would have a comedy show at like 7, and then they would have like a college dance party because it was a suitcase college, URI, University of Rhode Island. Everyone goes home on the weekends, but they come back for Sunday nights. So 9:00 Sunday night, you better be done with your little comedy show because it's college dance night. And they would
Right.
show up at like 8 halfway through your show. And it was so horrible. All they would do was just,
So brutal.
it wasn't even like there was a show going on.
There was several bars like that near colleges. There was one near Quinnipiac.
Yeah.
Same thing.
They would
Sunday
try
night
it.
showcase. And you'd see the kids piling in when they came back to school from the weekend.
Yeah.
And they just wanted to sit there and drink their pitchers of beer. And you were basically interrupting
You
them.
were the background
Yeah.
audience. Yeah.
You were
You're in
interrupting
their
them.
way.
Yes.
You're in
yeah.
their way.
And
Yeah.
so they're just yelling at you the whole time. And those were.
But you know what? I
brutal.
miss those
They're-
crowds because now college crowds, you can't say anything. I mean, I
Right.
I haven't done one. I got an offer a couple of months ago for one, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm the right comic.
I saw a video today of a guy working for the Comedy Zone
Mhm.
down in North Carolina, and a woman in the audience gets up and walks on stage in the middle of his set and says, "I don't appreciate the things you're talking about.
I
I
saw
think
that.
it's very misogynistic what you're doing and everything like." And she's like, "I'm like, oh my God, is this really what we've gotten to?"
Yeah.
That and the thing is, you don't really have perspective because you didn't hear what he said or anything like that. But he did say to the crowd, does anybody else feel this way? And nobody was on her side.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of the crowd walked her out of the room. But why is it okay for someone to get up in the middle of a live performance and walk on stage?
You know, one of the lines that I use a lot when people talk about comedy they don't like, I go, we're not here to please you, which sounds antithetical. But the truth is, I learned this, that we're supposed to do what we love. And if it pleases you, that's amazing. And if it doesn't, turn the channel, go to a different show.
Exactly.
My job is not to please. My job isn't to do leave who I am to please you. And someone said, I don't like what Chappelle did. I went, he's not here to please you. So if you don't like Chappelle, go watch somebody else.
And there's a ton of people that do like what he said and do like his comedy. And that's the thing. I think what it is it's almost like nowadays, people who never remember, there were always people who were like, yeah, I don't really like stand-up comedy, or yeah, I don't really get comedy. I'm not really into funny things. Like, there are people who truly have no sense of humor. They never used to come to clubs. Now it's almost like they're trying to inject themselves. But
I don't even know if it's that. It's like if my parents, if something came on TV they didn't think I should watch, they changed the channel. Nowadays, those parents want to take that off of TV so no one can see it.
Right.
Yeah. But, Carlin said, they can't argue with your perspective.
Right.
They might not agree with it, but they can't argue with it. It's your perspective, and that's what you bring to the stage. Exactly. So if someone doesn't like what I have to say, that's okay. Again, I'm not here to please that person. Hopefully they will be pleased because they understand where I'm coming from. Like you guys were talking earlier, about Marley, how he would bring the thing around to make people understand. Yeah. You have to have it's nice to have a sense of responsibility. If you're being irresponsible, then you need to, say, look, I'm sorry that I was irresponsible. Right. And I'll learn a lesson from that. And we all should learn lessons and not beat each other up because of it. It's like Whoopi Goldberg said an idiot thing. She said an idiot thing and she apologized for it, and they shouldn't give her 2 weeks off of television. Right. Joe Rogan, who, we all know is a phenomenal guy. Right. His perspective is a certain kind of thing. He was irresponsible with the guests that he brought on. He admitted it. He admitted it, said he was sorry. He made us understand why we've seen what we've seen from him. And I'm okay with it. We're allowed to make mistakes. You grow up in a very religious background and everything's a sin. But, it's not a sin. It's the Latin word for sine means mistake. Right. So you're not causing a sin. You're making a mistake, and hopefully it's a learning experience for you. And the other part, I'm sorry to interrupt, is about evolving. Like, you write a joke. I wrote a joke 25 years ago that wasn't really that funny and it wasn't smart. And then I've evolved as a human, as a comedian. Yeah. And now I can make that joke funny. We should be celebrating how comedians have evolved, or a human being has evolved, as opposed to breaking them down for who they used to be.
Right. And that's the thing. Cause even, some of the stuff that they've pulled out now from Joe, from 10 years ago about him calling the primatologist stupid. He's evolved since then. You can't judge him on today what he was 10 years ago. I do a lot about growing up Catholic and being, go in my religion, but I kind of walk the line and I'm a little bit irreverent in that. I had a woman come up to me one night after and said, you offended God. I said, no, I didn't offend God. I offended you. And I'm sorry if you're offended, but God made me and God gave me this sense of humor and God gave me this voice. So I know I didn't offend God. I doubt I'm going to get to heaven and he's going to go, you were in until you did that Jesus.
You did
the wedding at Cana joke. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the whole thing. The best compliment I ever got was in Boise. You have to say Boise because they get mad. Boise, and I said, I don't know why it should be Boise, but I said, we don't say New Jersey, but it's Boise. Yeah. And they really get angry if you say Boise. They do. But so I was in Boise and there was a kid who wanted to do stand-up and they weren't giving him the opportunity to do stand-up because they didn't like his mother because his mother was a liberal. So they didn't want to, they took away this kid's chance for his dream to be a stand-up comic. And they used the excuse that there was liquor being sold. Well, some kid does the national anthem at Fenway Park. There's liquor being sold there. So stop it.
Right.
So anyway, so I went to Boise to perform with this kid and a couple of locals, and we did a big show at the college, Boise State.
Mhm.
And so we can talk about, how it's important to let people have their dreams, and just because you don't agree with it, it doesn't matter. And it's a mostly Mormon audience because we're in that area.
Right.
When I was done, and I did a lot of stuff on different religion material, and these three women came up to me. They go, "Look, we didn't agree with what you talked about, but we loved and respected the way you brought it up." And to me, that's the greatest compliment that I've ever gotten, because I had grown to a place where I might have not been there, a few years before that or whatever.
Right.
I don't even remember the jokes.
But it sounds like they were evolved enough to say, I don't agree with it, but I appreciate some of it. I appreciate the way you said it.
They can agree to disagree, which we've gotten away from in this country right now.
Right.
Yeah. But it's the whole thing. It's like you go to a movie theater and people are talking because we've trained them to be okay to talk, and because they're watching movies at home. Well, we've trained audiences to get belligerent and allowed that to happen. And that's why when Chappelle stands up for comedians, you got to applaud him for that, because again, you might not agree with him, but that's how he feels. That's how he sees things. He finds something funny based on who he is and his upbringing and whatever. And if you don't find it funny, you find it, hurtful. Well, let's have a discussion about it. Let's
but
not.
That says more about the person who's offended than it does about the person who's offending. That again, I did a show a couple of years ago out in Middleborough, Mass, and it was an older crowd. It was a 55 plus community. And, we as comics will focus on the one negative, right? Out of 500 people, 499 came up to me and said, "Oh, we loved you. We loved what you did." Right. One guy goes to shake my hand because I was talking to a couple, and the guy goes to shake my hand, and I go, "Oh, hey, man." And he goes, "I just want you to know I'm a Catholic, and I was highly offended by your material." And then he just walked away. And the people I was talking to were like, what the hell was that from? Like, where did that come from? But but it bugged the shit out of me for weeks. That one guy saying that, I'm like, why? What did I say? Like, I think because he walked away and I didn't have a chance to explain myself. And I wanted to at least say, what part of it offended you? I don't make fun of Jesus. I make fun of the drunk guy at every wedding, at the wedding at Cana, where
same thing with Life of Brian. Remember Life of Brian?
Oh, yeah.
And these hypocritical, really hypocritical priests, were and if you ever see it on YouTube when
I have that interview with Michael Palin.
So they're these guys, they're gay priests who, weren't telling the world they were, so they're being hypocritical. There's nothing ever wrong or weird or crazy about being gay. No. It's wrong about hiding behind something, like they were. And they were saying, look, this is blasphemous. And Palin says, where did you see the blasphemy? We never made fun of Christ. We had Christ did the Sermon on the Mount, and it was word for word. And we respected Jesus. It was the people in the crowd that were around him.
Exactly.
So
that they were making fun of.
And if people are looking for it, they're going to get it. Right. People will project their fears onto other people. And that's what often happens. You'll find out it has nothing to do with you. You just happen to be the conduit for their anger.
Yeah, you're the catalyst for the way they felt.
They're waiting for the trigger word. They're waiting for the trigger sentence. They're waiting for whatever they can latch onto, take out of context, and say, "See, he said this, and it's not the right thing to say." Yeah, but you didn't say what I said before and what I said after. That kind of,
Yeah. The context. I was in Temecula, California, and it was a lot of Army and military there in the show, and there were just a terrific crowd. And I did a bit of supporting the Army. It was all about supporting the armed forces. And some guy wanted to fight me because he thought I was making fun of the armed forces. And I was like, wait a second. So some old lady, probably like 80 years old, stood up, and when you idiot, he was defending you. It's like I had someone in there, this lady, like calling the service person who was just looking for a fight,
right?
Wanted, and meanwhile, all I was doing was really just going, above and beyond to show my love and care and respect for these men and women. And so that's what happens. But anyway, the point is that not everyone's going to agree with what we're talking about now.
Right.
Which is okay.
There are trans people who feel endangered by what Chappelle said.
Right.
And I think that a discussion would be a much better way to talk about it, not an angry rant.
Right. Right.
I don't want anyone to die because of a joke.
No.
Or anyone to be, there is so much prejudice and racism in the world. It's just creepy, and it's always going to happen. It's always, you can't erase it. And Dave Chappelle didn't create it, and I don't think he's leading to more people dying. Hopefully not.
Right. Right.
No,
but it's his perspective. It's how he grew up. It's what he perceives things as, and you may disagree with it, like you said earlier, but you can't argue with it because it's how he was brought up. I'll
give you a weird example. When I was a little boy and grew up, and we would go get Chinese food, the accent would make us laugh.
Of course,
laugh, and we would laugh at it, and we would do it in a negative way back to each other. We would do that.
Yep.
And so that, you find out later in life, it's really not the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
So I had a bit where I actually had a chance to speak Chinese in the bit, and I learned it. I learned Chinese, so I was able to do it. So not only was I able to I wasn't making fun of the sound, but I was I found a way to take that bit that was very early in my career, kind of unintelligent, and give it an intelligence. And every once in a while, there's a person from China in the audience, and they love it that I took the time to learn the language instead of mocking the sound. But when I was a kid, that's the funniest thing in the world when I saw,
any accent was funny when you're a kid, because it's not what you're used to.
Sid Caesar, a genius, brilliant, did all these fake accents, and he was genius at it. Or Buddy Hackett had a bit where he did a Chinese thing, and it was funny because in that era, that's the way it was. Doesn't mean it's right.
You can't judge it by today's standards, though. I mean, we've talked about it. We've both been binge watching the Dean Martin celebrity roasts. Some of the shit they say.
Brooks.
Oh my God!
Foster Brooks was
brilliant.
Can't get enough.
But even I was watching one the other night, and Nipsey Russell was on, and I'm trying to think of who else, but they dropped the N-bomb like crazy, calling each other that, and I'm like,
they do some of the most racist jokes ever, and everyone's
Don Rickles
dying laughing.
Kisses Sammy Davis Jr. He goes, "Is it black on my lips?" Like, but you can't judge that by today's standards, because
people do.
They were doing that out of love. They loved Sammy. I mean, if you watch Sammy's speech at the end of that, he's almost in tears. He doesn't do any jokes. He says, "You know what? People got up here tonight, made a lot of fun of me, but you know what? They made fun of me because if people don't love you, they just ignore you. These people made fun of me because they love me and I love them." And I'm sitting there practically crying too, because
great.
You knew it was from a place of love,
But it is in reality, it's offensive. So you learn that as you get older. Yeah. And hopefully you learn from, again, we make mistakes and we learn from them.
Yep.
Hopefully the people who did blackface, like Jimmy Kimmel or what's his, few people did blackface. And
there were politicians at frat parties 30 years ago that did it.
And it was
wrong. And they know it's wrong now, but they didn't know it was wrong then.
Yeah, because of your upbringing. So that's what it's about. That's why evolving is a very cool thing, because if we can, there's a lot of little kids today who are growing up in a racist household, and racist, horrific racist. We get a lot of their parents at our shows, and these kids are going to have a horrible childhood of racism and anger and hatred. And hopefully they'll evolve to the place where they'll just, tell their parents, stop it. We don't want that.
Yeah. They can rise above that. They can rise above that upbringing.
Yeah.
And be better than what the example that they had growing up. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
That's what well said.
Well, because their parents are a product of what their upbringing as well.
Yeah. My mother was the most open-minded, hilarious, funniest person on the planet. When she was a little girl, her parents were, tough and angry and sort of racist in a sense, but my mom didn't take that with her. She taught us, she had times when there were some racist thoughts that were in her body, and my sister and I, we didn't let her get away with it. Because it wasn't like she was trying to be mean. That's the house she grew up in,
right?
So anyway, I mean, look, we're not going to please everybody, and that's not our job to do that. It's our job to have a discussion about this kind of thing, and I hope that people are inspired by change and inspired by learning, as opposed to wanting to attack and just slice people in half.
Yeah.
Well, you said it best. Have a dialogue. Talk about it. That's the best way to handle these things, is not to get angry and not to lash out at people, not to attack people, but let's have a dialogue about it. Let's look.
And after the dialogue, you might not agree, but
be okay with that. Say, okay, I you have your point, I have my point. We'll agree to disagree.
You've got your troubles, I've got mine.
Hey, thanks everyone for coming tonight.
We were talking about really cool gigs, and I wanted to tell you about this really cool thing that happened to me. I had gone out to LA, and I had I was very lucky because Mitzi Shore, who ran the Comedy Store, treated me like gold, and she did that. My son's a stand-up, and she treated him like gold as well. And since he has a different last name than I do, that's a whole other show and a whole other story. But she was really, really incredible to us, and she put me up at the house behind the Comedy Store. So the Comedy Store was my living room, and every night I went and watched the greatest comics in the world perform. So there was a show I did one night in the original room at the Comedy Store. It was November of '87, maybe, and I remember it because it was around Thanksgiving, and that's why I know the date. And I did a spot, and it was okay, and it wasn't anything to write home about. And who wants to write home anyway? You can send an email.
Yeah, right.
But I just you can text your parents, and and if they're alive, then they'll answer.
Yeah, right.
So I do this set, and this couple comes up to me, and they go, "Look, we're here to see the guy before you, and it wasn't our style of comedy, but we'd like you to do this private show in like a week from that time." And I went, "Oh, great." And it was like $200. They said, "All we can give you is $200." And to me at that time, it was $1 million to me.
Yeah.
And they said it was for the Shriners, those guys with the
Shriners
hats
hospitals
and the tiny cars.
Yeah, all that stuff. And I said, cool. So this is 1987. There's no cell phones. There's no GPS. I was in LA, and there was a book called the Thomas Brothers Guide, and you'd be able to find the directions how to get to where you had to get to. So I borrowed a friend's car, and I'm driving to this gig, and I dress up a little nice because I figured, I'm making $200. And so I go to as I'm getting closer, the address seems to be this monstrous theater building, and I made a mistake. I misheard them. It wasn't for the Shriners. It was the Shrine Auditorium. Now, the Shrine Auditorium is an 8,800 seat theater where the Academy Awards are held.
Holy shit.
I'm a little bit confused. I knock on the back door. I go, "Hi, my name's Eddie Brill," and they go, "Oh, Mr. Brill, follow us." I've never been called Mr. Brill.
Mr. Brill. Yeah. Good thing you signed. Good thing you dressed up.
I know. And they took me. They said, "We're going to take you to your dressing room." And I'm thinking, dressing room? And I go, what is this? And I'm passing the other dressing rooms, and it's Jerry Lee Lewis, the Coasters, the Shirelles, Jimmy Stewart, the actor, and Eddie Brill. And I'm like, and I go in the room and I close the door and I shit myself. I'm like, what am I?
Right. Because one of these things are not like the other.
Yeah, I don't. And so the stage manager comes in and I say, what is this? They go, it's a benefit and we're doing it. And there's all different kinds of acts. And I go, and you're the stand up and you're going to do 12 minutes or something. And I go, what am I doing here? Why me? And they go, well, Joey Bishop was sick and he couldn't do it. So we had to get a replacement last minute. And I'm going, is this real? I mean, it really just seemed fake,
Right,
I didn't see any of the other acts. Well, yeah, right. And so now it's sort of I look at the list, the order. I'm following Jimmy Stewart. I go, what does Jimmy Stewart do? He goes, he reads his poetry. And so he does that. So I'm walking down toward the stage and it's packed full, 800 people. The stage is like so massive, crazy. Right? And luckily there was a guy named Vic Dunlop who was a comic and he was the offstage announcer. So he would say, ladies and gentlemen, that was Jimmy Stewart. And now, so I knew him pretty well. He would come to Boston a lot and work.
Yep.
He had these crazy glasses and he would sell them after the show, Vic Dunlop. And so he said, Eddie, one piece of advice I can give you is to take your time with the material because it has to go to the back of the room and then work its way here, which was the greatest piece of advice ever. Because first of all, I was nervous as hell. And so I walked down and there's Jimmy Stewart on stage. I'm like, whoa, beautiful flowers.
It's great to be here. Yeah.
He was and the audience is enthralled. I'm like, oh my God. And the stage manager says, look, when he's done, start making your way across the stage because it's
going to take you a while to get there. Right.
You got to take a taxi to get to the place on stage.
To the spot. Holy crap.
So I'm walking, he finishes to, crazy applause and they bring me out. And they don't know better, they don't know who I am. And I walk, and as Jimmy Stewart's walking off, I'm walking on. He does one of these, and I go,
Good luck.
It was the other way around. I did it. I didn't know what to do, so I went, and he went, and I was like, oh my God, Jimmy did a head nod. So I'm freaking out. I go out. First joke gets a laugh. It happens to be because of Vic Dunlop's advice. It was a killer set, and
you waited.
I waited out the laugh. It was great. I finished the set and it was such a good, I never heard that many people laughing. And there's probably more people in that audience than in my whole career up until that point in audiences. Yeah. And so I get off, I'm walking off stage and there's Jimmy Stewart. He stayed on the side to watch. Very funny. Yeah. They very, very funny. And then Jerry Lewis pushes him out of the way and goes, you were very funny, son. You mind if I take my picture with you? And
Are you kidding?
I had nobody there with me to believe that the story is true.
That it happened. Right.
And, I hung out and it was fantastic. And we took photos and it was such a killer show. And everyone was so nice to me. And I ended up doing it the following year, which was fun.
Oh my
God. I did it and it was really, really great. And then now I'm heading back to Los Angeles because I had a spot at the Comedy Store like at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And so, I'm, driving
on a high,
cars off the ground, and I go up on stage, and the crowd just starts heckling me. And you suck! You get off the stage, and I'm going. That's
you
comedy,
baby. Yeah, Jimmy Stewart just said this shit was good.
The comedy god said you were too high, and they need to bring you back.
They bring me back in. So I learned a big lesson. That's happened a lot of times in my life. But
meanwhile, you're trying to
and I actually was laughing during the heckling because I realized
how ridiculous it was.
It was great.
Meanwhile, you're calling Jerry Lee Lewis the next morning. What photomat do you go to for your pictures? Can I get a copy of that? Because
great.
We talked to Frank O'Donnell.
Yeah.
from the Rhode Island comedy scene.
Yeah.
He had talked about a similar situation, but opposite, where he opened up for Michael Bolton at the Providence Civic Center, 16,000 people booing him, heckling him. Horrible. He's like, I hated it. He goes, I got off stage. I went to Periwinkle's and I told Charlie Hull, I got to get up on stage and get this stuff off. He goes, and of course at Periwinkle's it was great. He said, but
that's comedy.
You never know what you're going to walk into.
It seems to be when we have the set of our lifetime, a bomb is not far away, just to remind you. And then just the opposite is you could have a bomb, and then the next set or the set after that is one of those ones that just brings you right back.
Yeah.
I opened up for Ray Charles. I opened up for Ray Charles. 3 out of 4 shows, the audiences wouldn't let me talk.
Really?
But the one that I did really well at, Ray yelled at the audience every time. Said, "You motherfucker!" Somebody wanted a request. He goes, "I'm not playing shit for you people. You made fun of my opening act. You didn't give my opening act the respect, and I'm not giving you the respect." It was really kind of cool.
Wow, that is classy of him, though.
That is cool.
Yeah,
wow.
I got to see him perform, and that was one of my bucket list things. And I got to see him perform. He was amazing.
He was really, really good to me. Yeah, I did before Letterman. When Letterman was at NBC at Rockefeller Center, there was the theater was open, the Ed Sullivan, and there was a British host named Jonathan Ross, who's still like the Letterman guy of England.
Yeah.
And I got to do the Jonathan Ross show because Stephen Wright, who, again, a college friend, had to cancel for some gig. So I got to be in the show with Lily Tomlin, who's my hero, and and there was a couple other people on the show. And it was incredible. And it was live to London, so it's 1:30 in the afternoon, which is ridiculous.
Right, to try and do comedy.
But it's 6:30 in London, so it was okay. And I crushed it. And I took my girlfriend, and we had this. Oliver Keithley was with me.
Yeah, Oliver from the Comedy Connection in
Portland, Maine.
Yeah,
and he was married to Elizabeth, who's Cressito's wife. Now, and so the 4 of us were at this gig, and then I went to Connecticut to go do this gig later at night, and not laugh one. You know what I mean? It happens.
Crazy.
You know, what are you going to do?
I've told the story before. I did 2 bachelor parties in one night. Got done with the first bachelor party. Guys were like, "Come on, you guys should come out with us. We're gonna have a blast. We're going to the clubs. We're going to this." No, we got to do another show. Maybe we'll meet up later. Go to the second show. Do the same exact material. They wanted to hang us. The guy's like, the guy's doing the shake of the hand, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to walk you out the back door because these guys want to kill you." I'm like, okay, that's it. You never know.
It's such a crazy business.
Funny bad gig.
Yeah. We have it any other way.
No,
no, exactly. You're 100% right. That's what makes it fun, is because every crowd has its own personality. You don't know what you're going to get. We do a lot of fundraisers because we're involved with a fundraising company, and even from fundraiser to fundraiser, the crowds are different, so it's so much fun.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
So we've talked about some high points, and you did mention one bad gig, but
that wasn't a funny bad gig. That was
we always
just
ask
a bad
the guests to wrap up the end of the show. We always ask our guests about a funny bad gig, and that's the gig where the night it happened, it wasn't funny at all. It was just a bad gig.
Makes you rethink your career choice.
But the further away you get, you start to go, like, you're in the green room with other comics, and everyone's telling war stories, and they're like, and you're like, "Oh, you think that's bad?
This is your one-up story.
Wait for this."
Me and Wild Willie Parsons, who's a great comic from LA.
I've heard of him.
From San Diego, actually, but him and I were like best friends in LA, and we did a lot of work together. And there was a gig in Marlborough, Massachusetts, we were going to do together, and it was Celtics and Bruins every year. We're in the playoffs, so it's a bar, and there's televisions on, and they don't want to start the show because the games are going on. Yeah. So I'm on stage, and like, if the audience was here, the audience is looking at me sort of with their bodies facing this way, but they were watching the television, so they weren't paying
to the right.
Yeah. And I remember the Celtics game went later than the Bruins game. It started later, And I went over to the television at the bar and I started announcing the game because the sound was off.
Yep.
So I started. They weren't going to listen to my comedy,
Right.
So I
might
went.
as well do
I went over
something.
to the bar and I stood by the TV and I didn't do Johnny Most. I didn't have that accent. Only Mike Donovan, another genius. Of all
exactly.
Oh,
Yes.
in the world of comedy, he is just incredible.
Yeah.
I just did I did a voice like this, and and I was, remember, it was McHale and Bird, and it was the Celtics at their finest. And all of a sudden they went into overtime, and I was supposed to be done, but I kept doing it because the audience was laughing. And then finally, the Celtics start to lose, and some lady, stop talking, you're jinxing them, and I'm like, I don't think I'm jinxing them. I think they would have won with me or without me. I think that was one that was kind of funny, but it kind of sucked because I had to, another one. I was in New Jersey, and there was I get there. And the
I'm going to say it like that all the time now.
The crowd is 80 years old and up, and their grandparents.
Yeah.
And so I've worked to older crowds before,
average age is corpse.
Yeah, right. There was one guy breathing, and it was me.
Yeah.
And I go up on stage and I start doing what I do, and they're staring at me. And I've gone about 10 minutes, and I went, folks, I just want you to know, I don't think this is going well either. And I got my first laugh.
Yep.
And then I said, I'm not sure who you expected, because there were two comics named Charlie Brill, who was on the Ed Sullivan Show when the Beatles were on, and there was also a comedian named Marty Brill, who I didn't know either of them. So but Marty Brill was a Catskills guy. So I said, you guys probably expected Marty Brill, just as a joke, and the guy in the front goes, yeah, we expected Marty Brill. So when you came out, we were a little shocked. And I went, oh, okay. And I said, look, Marty Brill is a Catskill comic. He does old jokes. I'm observational, and I tell stories and all this kind of stuff. And I don't really know a lot of jokes, because as comedians, we don't really tell jokes. That's for the public. Yeah. So I said, I know two. And I told them two jokes, and they laughed. And I go, does anyone in the audience know any jokes? And a lady raised her hand. I come out with the mic like Phil Donahue, and she does a joke, and some guy raises his hand. I, know a joke. And I just kept, and now all of a sudden I spent 45 minutes in the crowd, and we were laughing and having a good time. Yep. And, to me, that's would have been horrific if I didn't take the moment to be make it reality theater. Like, look, folks, this is not going well. How are we going to fix this together?
Right. How are we still going to salvage the night and have a good time?
Right.
You guys can be part of it.
You didn't just try to plow through. You connected with them.
Right.
Yeah. How long pulled it out?
How long had you been doing comedy at that point?
Probably, I don't know. I don't remember. Probably 12 years, 10 years.
Yeah. So you were experienced enough to know you needed to pivot.
Yeah, because I were pulling out. You go to the closer like early, because you think, okay, well, they're going to laugh at this, and then I can, make up for it. And they weren't. They weren't getting it. They were more in shock. Like I had one. My father was down in Florida working on a deal with Jackie Mason and a bunch of people trying to raise money for this hotel. And Jackie was working the hotel, and my father said, my son's a comedian, and I'd only been doing comedy for like a year.
Yeah,
barely that was in the Boston days. And the guy goes, I'll let Eddie go on before me. So it's the same thing. I go out.
Holy shit.
And my material was shit. And it was cartoon impressions.
Yeah.
It's still shit.
Right.
That's another point. It's I was doing cartoon impressions and sexual jokes, all, everything. And the crowd was agape. They were like, this was so horrible. The only laugh I got was from my stepbrother, who was laughing because I was bombing so
of course.
Yeah,
that family support that we all look for.
Yes. And so when it was done, I walked off the stage, and Jackie Mason grabs the mic, and he shits all over me. and the crowd laughed really hard, but I broke down in tears because I hadn't done comedy a very long time. It's kind of led me to quitting actually for a while. And it's a longer story, but the coolest ending of the story is years later. I'm at the Comedy Store in LA. I get off stage and there's Jackie Mason. Hey kid, I thought you were going to quit after that night back in the blah blah blah. But you're funny, you're smart, you're good. So that worked out. He was a bit of a douche, but I was able to make him laugh.
I met him once. It was, believe it or not, it was in the bathroom at Sullivan's Steakhouse in New York City.
What?
Yes, I was there for a business.
Stealing up the steak.
I was there.
I have not heard this story.
No, I was there for a business meeting, and I won't mention names, but we can all figure out who he was talking about. But I stand in there and I go, "Oh my God, Jackie Mason! Oh, this is awesome!" I said, "I'm a huge fan. I'm a comic as well. I work in the Boston area." And he goes, "Oh yeah, and he mentioned a club booker owner name that we all know from Boston. He goes, "You work for him?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "That son of a bitch still owes me money." I go, "Yeah, well, he still owes me money, but probably a lot less than you." He goes, "I fucking hate that guy." And and we bonded at the, standing at the urinals because we both hated the same guy.
Hey, you mind if I hold your dick while you're pissing?
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Do you want me to shake it?
Yeah, you want me to shake? Don't worry. 5 is the usual. 5 times. Oh man.
Oh well, that's what I love that I learned a new story from you after all these
think
years.
I only have the same shit. But I have to thank you for being on, man. We really appreciate it because I've wanted to ask you for a long time, and I've seen you on other podcasts, and I'm like, well, I want to give it some space between, podcasts that are local to the New England area. So
great.
I'm so glad that you were able to be on. And honestly, I know just from your Facebook posts, you have a million stories. Yeah. I love when you post, because he'll literally post a story.
Right.
And you click on it and it's long, but the payoff at the end is always hilarious.
Right.
So anytime you want to come back on and tell more stories.
That. Well, when they open up the gigs big time again, let's work together.
Yeah.
Maybe we do like a big charity and then do like another regular paying show together. And we could do a live podcast. We can do.
Definitely. There's going to be some stuff happening here in Rhode Island. The comedy scene is going to be expanding. We can't say everything that we want, but the comedy scene is going to be expanding soon. And it's going to open up.
I'm lucky enough to, I've been working on some theater shows that I've been producing the past couple of years that have been growing. So I would love to have you up for something like that.
Where we're hanging out,
Yeah, definitely, Eddie.
Hanging out, laughing, telling stories, and by the way, we're doing some shows.
Yeah,
but also I like the charity. I like the charity part of it as well. We can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to.
That'd be awesome.
So anything else we can promote for you before we
I'm gonna, this is live, so I'm going to Florida. If people are in Florida, I'm going to I have gigs coming up, thank God. I'm doing this great gig in St. Louis at the end of the month. But in March, I teach workshops all over the world. You can't teach comedy. You can't convince me that someone can teach someone to be funny. But you could workshop comedy. I've been doing that all over the world, literally around the world for like 24 years. And I got a workshop in Florida on March 12th. And I'm working down there as well. But the key really is, go ahead.
Just so you know, this will be out on the audio platforms by next Thursday. So it'll be before March as well. So
I only take like 10 students. I already got 3 and I only decided to do it yesterday. And I always fill it up and it's really fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. But if you want to reach me, I'm at Instagram at Eddie Comic.
Yeah.
Eddie_Brill is Twitter, but you can always go to my page like eddiebrill.com and you can email me from there. There's not a lot of gigs on it because I haven't really worked in the last 2 years as much as I used to. I used to do between 500 and 600 shows a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I started, before I worked at Letterman, I would average 20 spots a week, in the city doing like 18 spots. and that
Right.
I think no matter how many shows a comic does, nobody is doing as many as they used to.
No.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
No.
we're all
We're hoping it opens up.
Yeah,
It opened up a little bit last spring, was pretty good through the summer, pretty good through the fall, and then it kind of closed back down.
It
And
seems
now
like it's starting to
I think so.
again.
I'm starting to get some
Yeah, my
stuff.
March is completely booked.
Yeah.
April
Nice.
is almost booked, so it's starting to kind of.
Great.
You get that snowball effect. If you can get a couple of months out, it seems like then it just keeps rolling from there. So,
Yeah, that would be perfect because New York, they're
Exactly.
actually changing the laws where you don't have to wear masks anymore in restaurants. And
Right.
Yeah.
Same here. Rhode Island and Mass just did it. I think February 28th is going to be the last day where they have mask mandates, and still obviously in medical offices and hospitals, yes, but
Right.
Other places, no. So I have the ticker going across the bottom. It has your website, eddiebrill.com.
and also that the link to the website will be in the show notes if you're listening. Just check out your show notes.
If you go to
and that'll be
Facebook,
there.
I'm sorry but if you go to
go ahead.
Facebook,
please.
I don't have many spaces open for Facebook, but you can follow, and I put a lot of stories. Probably about 100 a year I put on. I've written about 350 stories, but I put about 100 on Facebook, so you can go on there, and if you're following, you can read all the stories.
And again, they're great stories. Very interesting, constantly updated, interesting stories.
I will
love
make
them.
sure that link as well as Eddie's website are in the show notes as well.
And
Great.
we'll
you so
definitely stay in touch around anything that's going on up here. We'd love to have you up
Yeah,
here.
I miss Rhode Island. I've had so much fun in my life. I've done every college that Rhode Island has.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time in Rhode Island. John Stewart and I used to come up all the time during the jazz festival. And we
the
did a
Newport
comedy
Jazz
show.
Festival.
Yeah, they'd always hook us up to do this comedy show locally. So I've done, so much of Rhode Island, and I miss it. It's been way too long since I've been there.
Well, it's snowy and shitty now. We'll get you up here in the summer.
Wait a few months.
Definitely
Wait
a few months. So are you still in New York, or are you in Florida? Because I know
I'm in New York. I'm going.
My
brother. I lived in Florida for junior high school and high school. So my youngest brother, still lives there with his family, which is great because you go visit him, stay on his couch, and there's the beach down the street.
Right. And what did you say? He's at Hollywood Beach? Is he?
He's actually in Boca Raton now because his wife got a job in Boca, so they moved up. But yeah, we all grew up in the Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area.
Yep, that's an awesome area. I had cousins there. First time I went to Florida, I stayed for a week in Hollywood. It was great.
Yeah, it was very, very beautiful. And it still is kind of beautiful. It's kind of nice.
My goal is to move to the West Coast when I retire from my day job. I want to move to the West Coast. Do voiceovers and cruise ships.
Sounds good.
That's his retirement plan.
That's my plan.
Yeah,
I know.
Hopefully it works out.
We had what was it? Actually, wasn't it Mark Riccadonna? He said, "Yeah, I love it. Your retirement plan is my 2019."
Yeah, it was.
It was Mark, right?
Funny.
All right, Eddie. Thank you so much for being on tonight.
My pleasure. I'm glad I'm still awake.
Yeah. Thanks for staying awake.
I woke up at 7 this morning and I just couldn't go back to bed. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to need a nap. And I didn't take one. I'm like, but it was very energetic. So it was really great.
Thanks, man. Well, we'll be in touch. Definitely.
All right. Be well, you guys.
Have a good one. Bye, Eddie.
All right. Thank you.
And that was Eddie Brill. I am so fucking glad that we had him on. I was so excited.
Absolutely. He's just had an incredible career, and he's a very generous person with his time, his stories.
I'm telling you, you got to go on his Facebook page, even if, like he said, he's got limited space for friends on Facebook. But
you can just follow somebody.
You can
Facebook
follow
without
someone
being their friend.
and follow him because his stories are so amazing. Like they're full on stories about time he met George Carlin, or like he said, the time he worked with Ray Charles. They're great stories and very entertaining.
Yeah, definitely check that out. Again, you guys, thank you so much for the support. It's been great.
I know. Well, listen, folks, we really appreciate you listening. If you enjoy the podcast, please tell a friend about us. Please go on and give us a 5-star written review. Again, we're not famous, so we are trying to grow this podcast organically. We've done a pretty good job in the 5 years that we've been on.
You guys have been a big part
and we
of
really
that.
appreciate that. But we're moving on. We're moving forward. Next week we have Ed the Machine Regine coming back on.
He's got a new book out about his career, and we're excited to talk to him about that.
Yeah, so he had alluded to the book when we had him on.
He was writing
years
it
ago.
when we had him on last time,
and so now he's actually finished the book, and we want to have him come on and talk a little bit about that. So tune in next week to hear Ed the Machine Regine. And other than that, we will talk to you
next week.